AI is evolving beyond automation and into autonomy. AI agents are now making decisions, optimizing workflows, and transforming industries. At the same time, AI adoption doesn't happen in a vacuum. It requires strong innovation ecosystems where enterprises collaborate with startups, academia, and venture capital to accelerate learning and deployment. To break this down, I'm joined by Andreas Sjostrom, VP at Capgemini's Applied Innovation Exchange. Andreas has spent decades leading AI innovation programs, digital transformation, and corporate startup collaboration. Today, we'll discuss what's next for Agentic AI and the future of AI-driven ecosystems. Andreas, welcome to Just Curious.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
I'm excited to discuss what you've learned from helping the world's leading companies better understand and use AI and engage with hundreds of agentic AI startups. But let's start with some context. Tell us a little bit more about your role and what you do.
So I lead Capgemini's Global Innovation Hub here in Silicon Valley. This is a team that has been around since 2016, helping Fortune 100 companies navigate emerging ideas and emerging technologies on the premise that we need to bring to life ideas from the ecosystem. So I am focused exclusively on bringing in talent, ideas, startups, research from the outside of Capgemini into the client conversations. So that's what I do.
Awesome. You mentioned in one of our prior conversations that you've been tracking and perhaps met with 400 AI startups focused on agentic AI. Tell me a little bit more about what you've seen. What patterns are you seeing? What use cases are they most focused on? What's most interesting to you?
Yeah, right. So that's right. The last year, we have engaged with more than 400, I think it's 437, count exact, AI agent startups. We've never seen anything like this. This is absolutely unprecedented. I know Silicon Valley is known for a very vibrant and active ecosystem with entrepreneurs meeting capital, meeting research in this kind of very interesting, vibrant ecosystem. But this is beyond anything that we've seen. Every day of every week, every day, every week, you can choose to go to between 10 to 15 AI meetups in San Francisco alone, not counting South Bay with Palo Alto, Mountain View, and Sunnyvale, and so on. So it's literally exploding. And when it comes to types of domains or use cases, right, the first wave tend to be platform driven, like looking at building platforms that help create or enable creating AI agents. So there's a platform play for many startups. Some examples include Crew AI, Relevance, Cascade, and so on. Other entrepreneurs gravitate to specific business functions. So that could be HR, could be sales, marketing, customer service. So kind of business function oriented. And some startups focus on industry. So there are startups looking at insurance, banking, and so on. So it's now a wide range of perspectives and focus areas for startups. One thing I want to mention is that there is such a tight connect today between research at institutions like Stanford and UC Berkeley. We see actually from the time a paper on agentic AI is published until a couple of startups have been launched, today is on average between 20 to 25 days. So the ecosystem is so well connected and wired, and it moves very fast.
Crazy. We talked a little bit about use cases. Opportunity and value is created at the intersection of a problem and a solution. You spoke to from a solution side where a bunch of startups are focused. What about on the enterprise side? Where are they seeing the most opportunity to deploy agentic solutions?
It's all over the map. And you can slice and dice use cases in many types of dimensions. You can slice them over business function in an enterprise. But you can also slice them per role in the enterprise, even up to C-suite. Let's start with the CEO, right? So we have, as an example, AI agents for boardroom meetings. So these are agents that literally are like a board member and providing strategic guidance and even collaboration with other board members during strategy sessions in the board meeting sessions. Then we have CMO related agents, helping to craft narratives, tone of voice, brand voice, and that kind of thing. Hyper personalization for customers, right? So from a marketing and sales perspective, the dream that they've had for so long, the segment of one, meaning no longer do we have to talk about a type persona and generalize a type of person. We can actually talk about Jim, Steve, or Lisa as actual individuals and shape narrative storytelling text down to an individual level because of these agentic capabilities and generative AI capabilities. VP of engineering, another role, a key domain in agentic AI today is software development, right? So autonomous coding. So agents that can code and even collaborate in development teams. So you have an architect agent, a developer agent, a designer agent, a tester agent, and then they all collaborate either in between themselves or with other humans in that organization to more rapidly and effectively create new solutions. So it goes across the entire kind of organization. Maybe to name one last that keeps coming up more and more is supply chain. So supply chain tends to be a problem across all industries, right? So how do you predict bottlenecks and how do you deal with supply chain issues? And having agents trained to look out for in real time incidents and the relationship between how parts are assembled and so on helps accelerate and helps with the precision of planning for many clients.
Yeah. You touched on how agents can be deployed across an organization, supply chain, marketing, C-suite, boardroom. On the one hand, tremendous opportunity to transform a business, to make it more efficient. On the other hand, sounds complicated and messy, and I'm sure for people leading the tech org, full of risk. How do you help people navigate and maybe balance efficiency versus governance and control when it comes to experimenting with agentic solutions?
Yeah, right. So I think that's a good question. With agentic AI and AI in general, maybe Gen AI and agentic AI, I think there are two types of risks, and we need to be equally skilled in balancing them or addressing them. One type of risk is how do we ensure that even like their organic adoption of these tools in an organization, how do we ensure that they don't put the company organization at risk in terms of liability, in terms of regulation, in terms of data leakage or IP leakage, data integrity, confidentiality, all of those issues, rogue use of Gen AI or agentic AI, there are risks involved. On the other hand, there's another risk involved, and that is how do we avoid, or how do we as an organization, if I look at it from a client perspective, avoid that we fail in adopting these new tools and technologies, that we miss leveraging the opportunities of running faster and acting smarter. These are two priorities that need to go hand in hand. It's an interesting intersection where there are even startups that address that particular intersection. One example is Portal 26. Portal 26 highlights in real time for an organization where agentic AI and Gen AI are being used. And in what type of use cases? Where can we identify best practices? The license we have purchased, are they being used? Those two we have purchased, maybe there are 700 other ones we are actually using, and why is that? So Portal 26 helps navigate the best practice situation and also helps capture the rogue use of these tools. So use cases. So if a user is prompting a tool, or there is an agent that goes out and asks questions or generates content that could be foul or not following policy, it triggers and it categorizes. It can even stop the use of it. So it becomes even like an intersection of interest for entrepreneurs to navigate that.
Yeah. And I guess related, many of your clients are engaged in programs with Microsoft. I'm sure they are spending money on enterprise seat licenses with OpenAI and Anthropic. It's more of I guess I would consider a top-down sort of approach to AI deployment. Agentic solutions sound a little bit more bottoms up, not as much as someone just using ChatGPT on their own, but they may be coming from a business unit or a functional unit. How does one balance the top-down versus the bottoms-up in a large organization where it's not as easy as telling Jane not to do this? How do you balance that?
Yeah, so I think we've seen waves, maybe not like this before, but other waves of technological advancements and those having implications or impact on business. And what we learned from those waves, I think we can reapply safely here. We need to be able to be bimodal. We need to be able to work both on a strategic level, asking questions like, for our organization, what does it mean to have access to an abundance of expertise at near zero cost, which is this agentic AI opportunity? What does that mean for us when we can have 1 million agents working for us and not just 5 team members? This is a strategic level type question. We need to be able to work and address that. At the same time, how do we find relevant low-hanging fruit use cases so we can begin leveraging these opportunities, creating value from the get-go, not just like in the future in 5 years from now, but already now? That requires a bottom-up approach. That requires encouraging users in the organization to experiment, to learn, allow them to try and test, not lock down the infrastructure, prohibit or set too stern boundaries. So practices like celebrating small wins, like when you've found a tool that you found useful, share it, celebrate that. And very easy to kind of do, but still strategically important.
And when it comes to bottoms up use case identification, what do you recommend people do? Let's say I'm the CMO of a large beverage company, and I think there are probably opportunities for me to improve how we run our marketing function. What are the first steps you'd recommend someone take to identify those use cases that could be served by generative AI or agentic AI?
Right. I think there's an inside out and outside in approach, and combining them is probably a good thing. The inside out approach means ask yourself the question inside of this marketing team, what are some of the problems, pain points that we're having today? It could be like it takes a lot of time from an idea we generate until something is published online. And why is that? The list of pain points and problems that could go on and on. And then ask yourself, where might we apply agentic AI or generative AI to help solve for those problems? So that's one way to be led by opportunities or problems that we know about. In this stage of technological evolution, especially in agentic AI, how do you know what is possible with agentic AI? I know I have my problems, but how do I know that I can actually use this new tool to help address it if I haven't experimented with it, if I haven't used it on almost like a daily basis? The analogy here that I want to make is, I'm sure you and everyone who's listening, you remember the last phone you had that was not an app phone, like an Android or an iPhone, like the Nokia phone or something like that, right? And I remember that. I remember that shift from the old phone to the new one. And in those first couple of years, many of us, I think most, were excited about, why, I can do this, I can do that. And I showed my friend or my mom or my brother or my team member, I found this, we could do that. And as a consultant, I got pulled into many client conversations where the client wanted to explore, what can we do with this new thing, right? Can we use it for customer experience? Can we use it for operational excellence? Or what can we use it for? I remember that in some of those workshops, many of them, unfortunately, there was this one person that said, I don't think we need this. We don't need a strategy around this. It's just a phone. I don't understand. Why do we need to talk about ROI on this? It doesn't make sense. It turns out that person was very often a Nokia or BlackBerry person, meaning the person that never used it, haven't tried it. So the point I want to make here is that if you as a leader want to be part of making have a constructive impact and be able to lead this change, you have to use it yourself, right, on a daily basis. Otherwise, you cannot imagine how to apply it to solve your problem. So it comes back again, we need to be bimodal. Look at this strategically, but also very hands-on practical. If it's just ChatGPT, it's become this Excel of AI. Use it every day. Create your own custom GPT. Play around with different ways to prompt. Don't just prompt it, ask it to create the prompt based on what you need to do. And you will immediately see a much improved response back. Then you have hundreds of new AI tools. Just spend an hour here and there, maybe one a week. find a new tool, try it. We're in that state now where we need to be able to do those two things at the same time.
Yeah. And I guess dovetailing off of that, your Applied Innovation Exchange, Capgemini's Applied Innovation Exchange, is a unique model of working with startups and VCs and academia. How does this ecosystem approach accelerate AI understanding and adoption?
Yeah, so it turns out that many of the ideas that eventually get adopted and put into global scale originate in an ecosystem like this. So the relationships that we can form with a venture cap firm, for example, understanding what they are investing in, and then getting to know some of their portfolio companies, or meeting an entrepreneur with an idea with no funding yet, but hearing the idea in this ecosystem, or engaging with Stanford and their AI lab and looking at some of their ongoing research. When we engage with clients on their journey, wherever they're heading, being informed of and about these emerging ideas and emerging technologies, then the newest crop of AI agent startups and so on. When we bring that to life with clients, it sometimes provokes, it sometimes inspires, but it opens the window to the new. You introduce the new and we test it, we try it. So it's kind of the first discovery step that we're taking together with the client that accelerates understanding. So we want to accelerate understanding. But of course, it's really important not to get lost in a never-ending just discovery or never-ending POC kind of territory. At the end of the day, what we have to help the client do is to, from that first moment of realization, to take the steps to practical implementation and realization of value. That's why, from an innovation hub or lab perspective, I feel privileged in the fact that I have 350,000 in Capgemini that can help me bring those solutions to life. So I have scale behind me as we discover these ideas with clients.
Yeah. And how, when it comes to going from understanding to experimentation and finding that initial POC or the first pilots that you want to run, what are best practices for finding the needle in the haystack or navigating 400 or 430 agentic solutions to find the right ones? What do you recommend as far as best practices?
Yeah, so I think so far anyway, it turns out that what we've learned in the previous ways we can reapply here. And there are several tools you can apply and use, like programmatically, like framework type tools. I'll just give like one example what I mean when I say that. When we ideate with a client on a particular domain, it could be the CMO and her team or his team or whatever business function. What we can bring to life is the quadrant of value and complexity. It's a very helpful tool. So let's say we find 20 potential use cases for applying agentic AI. The client is oftentimes the best to navigate. If we were to solve for this, what value would it be? Like, rate it. High value, low value, what is it? We are really good at how complex would it be? How hard would it be to actually do? So now we have low complexity, high complexity. Navigating to high value, low complexity as the first few steps is a pretty good idea. So what are the early wins we can go for? Why that is so is that we can get to speed very quickly, we can go into production very quickly, and we learn along the way what worked and what didn't work before we actually tackle the hard to solve problems. That's obviously one approach.
And when it comes to common mistakes, outside of picking something that's low value and highly complex, what are the most common mistakes enterprises make when trying to integrate AI and AI startups into their existing systems?
Yeah, so probably a few different reasons. We haven't really in our conversation gone into different types of AI agents or agentic AI. The reason why I go there, I think that the problem of agentic, I think, is likely dependent on the level of sophistication of the agent. So what I mean is, an AI agent today, there's no such thing as all agents are equal. Some agents are actually designed to do very simple things, just automate moving a number from there to there, given a few different factors, and there's very little reasoning or autonomy and so on, but we still can call it an agent. It does something. There is a gray zone between agentic AI and RPA, admittedly, I think. But just for the sake of it, so there are less sophisticated agents. And then on the other end of the scale, we have agents that are unprompted. You don't need to prompt them to do anything because they think for themselves and they have full agency. They have access to APIs and tools. They even have access to developer tools. So if there is an app that they need to solve for something, they can build it and then deploy it themselves. So this whole full reasoning engine powering it up that has a higher IQ, so to speak, than a PhD in many domains, that's the highest level of sophistication. Now we have a broad range of different types of sophistication of AI agents, right? What are some problems that might occur if you have a non-sophisticated, AI agent versus the problems that can occur if you have a very sophisticated AI agent? Very different types of problems, right?
Yeah.
But if I were to kind of select one problem that probably addresses the whole range of agentic AI sophistication, it's the data quality problem. So if you want to get the best use of your AI agents, you need to make sure that it sits on top of the best data, right? So you need to have context data for it. If you want to, if it's a supply chain AI agent, the supply chain data must be accurate, right? You can't have bad data there. It's going to make decisions that doesn't make any sense, right? So those companies and organizations that have since before already established sound, effective data governance practices, they are on top of their data game, so to speak, their agentic solutions will outperform the rest, so to speak. So data quality is probably the one thing that many companies overlook today.
Yeah. Is that a first step in one of your engagements to understand the readiness of an organization before you begin to look for tools that are going to leverage data that may be clean, it may be messy, it may not be there? It was one of the first steps to really evaluate kind of your data readiness.
I think there is a tendency among consultants, Capgemini and myself included, to gravitate to assessments, right? And readiness assessments to kind of create a starting point and then kind of map out a journey and maybe sometimes reassess to see if we are progressing in the maturity model from level 1 or to 5 or whatever, levels you want to set. I think it makes sense. I like it. But my experience after 30 years of being a consultant and in Capgemini, the real value of these assessments is probably not the actual results of the assessment, but the conversations that happened around it. Just the fact that we start to talk about how ready are we on a strategic level to adopt this, or how ready is HR to deal with these questions, or is the tech stack actually up to this? It triggers conversations and change as just part of that. So the score is less important than the actual actions or conversations that happened around the assessment. That's my take.
Yeah. And I guess when it comes to the agentic evaluation process, does the importance of data readiness influence who is involved in the experiment? So let's take a non-AI startup pilot. You may be able to just run that pilot within your innovation team, or maybe it's the marketing function. Whereas if we want to effectively use these agents, we are using data. That data is probably somewhere else in the organization, managed by another team. How does that influence then what these pilots look like from a team perspective, and also how quickly we can get them off the ground?
Yeah, no, it's a really good question. And the closer you get to actual implementation, right, to setting this thing into production, that means you really have to have worked out data pipelines or system integration, the way the agent is connected to systems or record or whatever, tech stack databases you have. The closer you get to implementing, the more important is it obviously that you have worked out the governance aspects, questions around security, authentication, access, and actually delegation. I think delegation is a really interesting question from an AI agent perspective. So sometimes imagine an AI agent, and you can of course imagine it to have its own identity and its own then privileges in the system or in the organization. But sometimes it acts on behalf of someone. Let's say we have an agent to build a report. Let's just play with that. If I ask it and I'm a junior team member, it shouldn't be allowed to produce a report on confidential information. But if the CEO asks it, it should act on the behalf of the requester, right? So the delegation of privileges is obviously very important in an agentic context. So just coincidentally, last week I was invited to a working group meeting at Stanford University. It was organized by Stanford and Consumer Reports, and the organizations that were invited included OpenAI, Microsoft, Google, Visa, and some other. And the topic was consumer authorized AI agents, with the idea that we'll all one day have an AI agent representing ourselves. And if I have an AI agent representing me in transacting with the airline or with the retailer, how do I delegate and authenticate the agent as me in front of the retailer and so on? So I think those are questions that you have to work out, and the sooner the better. Those are questions that you will stumble on, or kind of you have to address during piloting and so on. But if you haven't before production, you're gonna have to do it before.
Yeah. I could ask you hundreds of questions. Unfortunately, we only have a few minutes. So let me ask you lastly, if a business leader is just starting to explore AI adoption, what's the first step you'd recommend?
So I think the key question today, where we are in the market and where it's evolving from today, is you need to start acknowledging, embracing two perspectives. The first one, you need to be led by business value first. So where can we deliver value with this new thing? So be kind of focusing on business value, and it can be many things depending on what company, what priorities you have, and so on. Don't be led astray to use cases that have no meaning, that won't produce value. So be value-led. But the second perspective is, we're in a time today where you need to allow yourself and your team members, encourage yourself and encourage your team members to experiment with the new. True insights, I believe, comes from your own experience. You can be told many things, but unless it comes from within, you are not going to be much part of the change. So make yourself part of the change by staying curious and learning and using yourself. If you do that, you can connect to the strategic level type of conversations.
Yeah. And to stay curious, if you're a C-suite leader who's very busy, what do you recommend they do? I mean, I know how I experiment, but I'm C-suite at a small company. But if you're the leader of a Fortune 100 company, you don't have a lot of time. How do you recommend they experiment?
That's a good question, and we are also different. Some read very quickly. Some hate reading. Some love listening, and they listen by twice the speed, right? So they fast forward and they learn by just listening very, very quickly, right? Some follow some thought leaders, right, in the space. And depending on the space, the intersection of AI and your domain, identify those, follow what they are writing and what they're posting about, and find where they are at. Some learn a lot by watching YouTube videos, and there's a ton of business/AI YouTube videos out there that gets made very professionally, super up to date. So there's an abundance of sources to learn from. Deep learning AI, if you have a technical kind of leaning towards trying to understand the technology. Ali Miller on LinkedIn, Ethan Mollick on LinkedIn, Andrew Ng on LinkedIn and other places. Gravitate to those sources. But again, most importantly, don't let the day go and you haven't used one of these tools. You're thinking about problems. If it's no other model than ChatGPT, there are 10 others. If it's Mistral or anything else, use it, right? Experiment with easy to get started with tools on Agentic, like Cascade, for example, or Relevance AI. It's literally 30 seconds to create an AI agent on some of these tools. It's not a big investment. So that's my advice as well. Just spend time experimenting.
Awesome. Andreas, I really appreciate your time and coming by. Just curious.
I appreciate you having me. Thank you so much.